What kind of mother lets the rain in, and lets something darker in with it? Helena did. Subscribe to hear why. The storm came earlier than the forecast predicted. Charleston had seen its fair share of heavy rains and ghost stories. But that Thursday evening felt like a fusion of both. The wind howled with the voice of something ancient, brushing past the old windows of the estate like a warning whispered in a foreign tongue. Inside, Helena stood alone in the kitchen, a place once full of life and chatter, now filled only with the ticking of an antique clock and the occasional creak of the wooden beams overhead. Helena was 42, a widow. It had been 4 years since Thomas died in that accident on the I-26. A drunk driver slamming into their SUV on a rain-slicked highway. 4 years since her life split in two, before and after. People said time healed, but they never said how unevenly it worked. Some wounds scabbed over with the weeks. Others festered in silence. Helena carried hers like a wine stain in silk, faint enough to forget at a glance. But always there, woven into the fabric. The house groaned as the rain intensified. Water streamed down the kitchen window, blurring the trees outside into haunting silhouettes. Helena reached for the wine bottle without looking. It had become a kind of ritual. Pinot Noir at 6. Glass number 2 by 7. Then a bath she rarely finished. She wore her old silk nightgown tonight, a deep navy piece with lace at the sleeves. Slightly frayed from too many cold washes. She hadn't planned for anyone to see her in it. She hadn't planned for anyone to see her at all. Logan hadn't called in weeks. Not since their last conversation ended with the quiet venom of an accusation. You stopped being my mom the day he died. She had nothing to say in return. It wasn't that Helena didn't love her son. She did, fiercely, but Thomas had been the bridge between them. And when that bridge burned, neither of them had known how to swim. Logan fled to California for college, chasing a future far from the mansion where his father's voice used to echo. Helena stayed behind, tending to memories like fragile antiques she couldn't quite throw away. She descended the steps to the basement with caution. The dim light at the stairwell flickered as if reluctant to witness what lay below. The smell hit her first, damp, metallic, a whisper of decay. When her foot reached the last step, she felt it, the cold kiss of water on her bare skin. The basement was flooded, not entirely, just enough to soak the cardboard boxes filled with old manuscripts and photographs. To ruin the corners of the Persian rug she had brought back from a trip to Istanbul years ago. She didn't scream, she didn't panic. Instead, Helena turned around, ascended the stairs in silence, and picked up her phone. Emergency plumbing service. The voice answered on the third ring. Yes, I need someone tonight. There's water in the basement. Can you give me the address? Mom, she did, calmly. The dispatcher told her someone would arrive within an hour. Helena thanked them, then poured another glass. The storm hadn't let up. Thunder rumbled like distant artillery. Somewhere deep in the house, a shutter slammed shut with a metallic clang. But Helena didn't flinch. Her gaze had drifted to the fireplace, where an old photograph sat slightly askew. Thomas and Logan, arms slung around each other, both of them sunburnt from a forgotten beach trip. She couldn't remember where it was taken. Maybe Myrtle Beach, maybe Folly. It didn't matter. She stood there for a long time, glass in hand, body still, until the doorbell rang, a jarring sound against the quietude of her world. She opened the door. He stood there, dripping wet, the kind of man built for work and long days. Young, too young, perhaps, early 30s at most. His uniform was orange, utility style, with reflective strips that caught the porch light and shimmered faintly. His hair was dark, plastered to his forehead from the rain, and his eyes were a green so intense they seemed lit from within. Mom, I'm here for the basement. His voice was low, edged with that southern politeness that didn't belong in today's world. Helena nodded and stepped aside. As he entered, she caught a trace of something earthy and raw, wet soil, metal, and cologne barely hanging on beneath the storm. It's down the hall, door at the end. He looked around, eyes lingering on the high ceilings. The faded wallpaper, The gallery of old frames leading to the stairwell. Beautiful house. It used to be. She didn't realize she'd said it out loud until he turned and gave her a look. Not pity, not quite curiosity either, something else. An understanding, maybe, or at least a recognition of grief. The kind that didn't require stories. He descended the steps, toolkit in hand. She heard the soft slosh of water again. Then silence. Then the gentle clinking of tools. She sat on the couch, glass trembling in her hand. Not from fear, from something closer to anticipation, though she couldn't name what for. Her heart had been still for so long. Even a whisper of movement felt like an earthquake. From below, his voice carried up. It's not too bad. Looks like a crack near the west wall. I can patch it temporarily. But you'll need a full inspection. Do what you can, she replied. She listened to the sound of work, the scrape of metal, the hiss of tape, the movement of boots on wet floor. It was strangely comforting, a reminder that someone else was here. Someone real. She didn't notice when she fell asleep. Wine still half full, rain tapping its rhythm against the glass like a lullaby. When she opened her eyes, it was because she felt a shift in the room, a weight added. A presence acknowledged. He was standing in the archway. I did what I could, he said, voice quieter now. She blinked, realized the fire had gone out, realized she hadn't moved in nearly an hour. Thank you. He lingered a moment, then turned to leave, but before he could, Helena said the thing that surprised even herself. Would you like a towel? He paused, then nodded. She walked slowly to the hallway, opened the linen closet, and pulled out the softest one she could find. Navy blue, like her nightgown. As she handed it to him, their fingers brushed. A fleeting touch, accidental, but enough to feel the heat between two people who hadn't expected anything more than a service call. He smiled, just barely. Thank you, Mom. She watched him walk away, door closing behind him with the gentlest of clicks. The storm still howled outside, but it felt different now, quieter, almost, or maybe the noise had moved somewhere else. She turned toward the fireplace again. The photo was no longer askew. Somehow, it had straightened. She didn't remember fixing it. And yet, she picked up her glass, took the last sip, and stared out the window. The basement had flooded, but her heart had been empty far longer. The rain didn't stop. It slid down the windows like silent tears while thunder rolled through the sky in long, shaking growls. In the basement, the water had begun to settle, forming a still, shallow pool that mirrored the soft yellow light of the single bulb Jason had rigged up from the breaker box. He knelt there in the ankle-deep cold, shirt clinging to his skin, hands moving with the kind of focus only years of repetition could bring. He didn't speak much, not because he was rude or withdrawn, but because the silence itself seemed sacred inside that old house. Helena stood at the top of the stairs, wrapped in a shawl now, the lace edge of her nightgown barely visible beneath. In one hand, she held a steaming cup of tea. In the other, a towel, still warm from the dryer. She hadn't meant to watch him work, but there was something magnetic about the way he moved, unbothered by the wet, unhurried in his precision. He looked up. Their eyes met across the water and wood. Through dimness and history, Helena started to speak, then stopped. She descended slowly, the wood steps creaking underfoot like voices waking in their sleep. Jason stood as she reached the last stair, his frame taller than she'd anticipated, his eyes softer now in the yellow light. I thought you could use this, she said, holding out the towel first. Thank you, he said, voice quieter in the basement, less like a stranger now. She passed him the tea. His fingers brushed hers again, this time with the barest pause. His hands were rough, warm despite the chill. Helena noticed the way he looked at her, not with hunger or flirtation, but with curiosity, with presence, with a kind of reverence she hadn't felt in years. She watched him take a sip. I didn't mean to stare, she said. You weren't. They stood there, the hum of the house returning, pipes groaning, rain muttering against the walls. And beneath it all, the shared quiet of two people who had somehow, wandered into each other's gravity. Jason looked around the basement. "You could turn this into something beautiful," he said. Helena blinked. "It used to be a study. My husband wrote here." Jason nodded as if he understood. "Now it's a basin. A grave," she added, not to him, but to the room itself. He crouched again, examining the sealed crack he'd bandaged with temporary compound. The silence stretched until she asked, without thinking, "Have you ever lost someone?" He paused. "My brother, 4 years ago, motorcycle accident." Helena's breath caught. "Thomas died the same year," she said. "Car crash." Jason looked up. "You never really get used to it, do you?" "No," she said, voice breaking ever so slightly. "You just learn to move around the empty spaces." She stepped off the stair. The water cold against her feet. She didn't mind. She walked to the old desk pushed into a corner. One leg broken. It had belonged to Thomas. She placed a hand on it gently, like touching the shoulder of a ghost. Jason joined her, his boots sloshing softly. "This house," he said, "feels like it remembers everything." She nodded. "Sometimes I wish it didn't." She looked up at him then. Close now. His face was damp, a drop of water hanging from his jaw. Without thinking, she reached up and brushed it away. It was a small thing. A tender, human gesture. But it cracked something. Jason's breath caught in his chest. And Helena could see the weight he carried in his shoulders, the same weight she bore. Loss. Silence. The yearning for something unnamed. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Time slowing like water thickening around their ankles. "I should," he began. But her hand stayed on his face. "You don't have to." It wasn't seduction, not in the usual sense. It was recognition. She wasn't offering her body. She was offering her loneliness. Her ache, her pulse, a tether out of isolation. Jason leaned into the touch. Their foreheads met, breath mingling in the musty air. For Helena, it wasn't just a touch. It was resurrection, for the first time in years. She felt like something more than a memory keeper. She wasn't a widow in that moment. She was a woman, alive, present, wanted. When his hands finally found her waist, they didn't grope or clutch. They held, as if trying to memorize the shape of a moment. Her silk nightgown, still clinging to her, made her feel vulnerable, almost indecent. But Jason looked at her like she was made of something sacred. They didn't speak. There was no need. When she kissed him, it wasn't fire. It was water, slow, enveloping, quiet, like being pulled under not by force, but by surrender. The basement smelled of damp stone, old wood, and the faintest hint of lavender from her towel. The storm outside dulled to a low moan, wind threading through broken shutters like a breath through parted lips. She led him to the dry corner by the window. The old Persian rug, though soaked in places, had a patch untouched by the flood. She lay back there, hair splayed, heart pounding against her ribs like wings trying to open. Jason hovered over her, unsure, but her eyes told him what words could not. It was okay. It was more than okay. They undressed each other with reverence, as though folding away armor. Every scar, every sigh, every shiver acknowledged, not erased, not hidden. By the time the lightning lit the sky again, the basement had changed. It was no longer a grave. It was a bedroom. Hours passed unnoticed. When Helena woke, she was covered by his jacket. Still warm, Jason was sitting by the stairs, watching the rain through the high window. "You stayed," she said. He turned. "I didn't want to leave you down here alone." She sat up. Her bones ached, but not from age, from release, from the trembling aftermath of being seen. "Thank you." Jason nodded. Outside, the storm had broken. A gray dawn began to seep through the sky. The basement smelled different now, like breath after a long cry, like the first clean moment after a storm. Jason stood, offered her a hand. She took it. As they climbed the stairs together, Helena didn't look back. The house would remember. But now, so would she. The storm never really stopped. Not outside, and certainly not inside her. It would quiet for a while, a stillness between heartbeats, between thunderclaps, but it was always there. humming beneath the surface. Helena waited for the sound of rain like someone waits for a lover's voice. Each time the sky darkened, something inside her stirred, and each time it poured. Jason returned. Their meetings weren't planned, not officially, but the pattern formed quickly. Whenever clouds swelled over Charleston, Helena found herself preparing warm towels, lit candles, sometimes a bottle of wine left uncorked beside the sink. The basement no longer smelled of mildew and sorrow. It smelled of lavender and coffee. The things lived in and lingered over. Jason arrived with boots damp and eyes quiet. He never used the front door anymore. He didn't have to. The storm called him, and Helena answered. They made no declarations, no promises, just touches in the dark and whispers between breaths. She didn't ask about his life outside the house, and he didn't ask about hers in the daylight. What they had was between the rain. Once, he pressed his ear to her chest and murmured, "You sound like thunder." She had smiled at that, because no one had ever said anything more true. But the outside world has its own weather, and it doesn't care for poetry. It was a Tuesday evening when Logan tried to FaceTime her. She saw the screen light up, his name glowing across the silence, and her finger hovered above the accept button, then didn't move. She let it ring out. Jason was still in the shower upstairs, and Helena stood in the hallway, heart thumping in guilt's rhythm. When the call ended, she set the phone down face down. Another buzz. A text. "Everything okay, Mom?" She didn't answer. That week, Logan called twice more, then he emailed, then he called her bank. He noticed her spending had changed. Large transfers to boutique stores. A new mattress ordered to be delivered anonymously. Subtle shifts, but not subtle enough. She'd begun to hum again, to smile mid-conversation when she forgot he was watching. And one night, during a thunderstorm in LA, Logan decided something was wrong. He didn't tell her he was coming home. He simply packed a bag, booked the earliest red-eye, and told himself he was going to make sure his mother was okay. That she wasn't losing her mind. Or worse, being taken advantage of. The house was quiet when he arrived. The rain soft, but steady. His old key still worked. And when he stepped inside, it felt like entering a time capsule. The same rug, the same photographs, the same smell of old wood and forgotten dinners. He called out, "Mom," no answer. He heard a sound then, faint, muffled, from the basement. He walked slowly, pausing at each step like the house might tell him to stop. But it didn't. As he neared the basement door, he noticed something strange, a faint glow from beneath. Light, candlelight. He opened the door and descended. And there, at the bottom of the stairs, he saw something that did not compute. A man, shirtless, wearing work pants streaked with mud, sitting on the edge of the old desk, drying his hands with a towel that once belonged in their family linen closet. Jason froze. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. Then Helena stepped into view. Behind Jason, wrapped in a long robe, hair still damp, eyes wide and caught between worlds. Logan stopped breathing for a moment. "Mom," the word was barely a sound. Helena didn't respond. Her lips parted but nothing came out. Jason stood, his hands now behind him, eyes dropping to the floor. Logan turned slowly, walked up the stairs one step, then two. At the top, he stopped. He didn't slam the door. He didn't shout. He just stood there, like someone trying to piece together a language they never learned. Helena followed, robe clutched to her chest. "Logan, I was going to tell you." "When?" he asked, voice shaking. "I don't know." "Who is he?" Jason was halfway up the stairs now. Silent. Helena looked down at him, then back to Logan. He fixed the basement. A laugh escaped Logan's lips. Sharp and bitter. Apparently he fixed more than that. "Please, don't what? Judge you? Be shocked? Be angry that I flew here thinking you were sick or dying or…" "I don't even know." She reached out. He stepped back. "I lost Dad too, Mom." "I know. No, I don't think you do. Because instead of leaning on me, you disappeared, you shut down, and now I come back and you're playing house with some guy who crawled out of the plumbing." Jason flinched at that, but said nothing. Helena's voice cracked. It wasn't planned. It wasn't supposed to happen. But it did. The rain intensified outside, slamming against the windows like angry fists. Helena turned away, one hand covering her mouth. Jason finally spoke. "I should go." But Logan turned to him. "No, you should have never been here in the first place." Helena's eyes flared. "Don't speak to him like that." Logan looked at her like he no longer recognized her. "You loved Dad. I know you did. But this." He shook his head, then walked toward the front door. "Logan, please, stay, let me explain." He opened the door. Cold wind rushed in, dragging rain across the hallway. "I don't know who you are anymore." And then he was gone. The door closed. Jason stood in the hallway, shirt in hand, unsure of his place. The candlelight flickered from the stairwell. Helena turned, trembling. "He hates me." Jason shook his head. "He's hurt." "That's not the same thing." She looked at him, eyes brimming. "You should go too." Jason didn't argue. He placed the towel on the banister, nodded once, and walked out into the rain. Helena stood alone in the hall. The house, once full of memories, now echoed with silence again. And outside, the storm kept on, because the storm never really stopped. The door opened, rain followed. Logan stepped inside, shoulders damp, breath tight, the kind of return that wasn't meant to be quiet. And there they were, Helena, Jason, in the kitchen, arms around each other. She had her head on his chest. He had one hand gently at the small of her back. A silence broken not by words, but by the slap of Logan's backpack hitting the floor. "He's younger than Dad was." Helena jumped, pulling away. Jason stepped back. The room pulsed with stillness before it shattered. "Logan, no, no, you don't get to say anything yet." His voice was loud but not wild. Controlled, like someone holding the steering wheel during a crash. Helena's lips moved, but no words came, her face pale, her eyes full, not with guilt, with something else, something broken. Jason didn't say a word. He reached for his coat. Helena reached for his arm. Jason looked at her once. A look that said everything and nothing. Then he left, quiet, rain swallowing his footsteps. Logan stood in the kitchen doorway. The walls too small for what he was holding. "Mom, what is this?" Helena turned her back. "I didn't plan for it." "You think that makes it better?" She gripped the sink. "I know how it looks." Logan let out a laugh. Hollow. "No, I don't think you do." "Then tell me." He didn't. He just walked upstairs. The old wood moaned under his weight. Then the slam of a door. Then nothing. 3 days passed. Helena knocked once the first night. No answer. The second night, she left a tray at the door, untouched. The third night, there was a note, folded, slid under her door. She opened it with trembling fingers. "Mom, I used to think you died with Dad. Now I just think you never really lived as a mother." Logan. Her knees buckled. She made it to the sink, turned on the faucet. Water ran over her hands, over her wrists. She didn't scrub, didn't wash. She just stood there, watching it spill, overflow. She couldn't cry. The water did it for her. The house grew quieter after that. Days folded into each other like pages of a book no one finished reading. Helena moved through the rooms like she was made of smoke, light-footed and fading. Dust settled faster now. The windows yellowed at the corners. The doorbell never rang. Logan stopped answering her texts. She didn't try calling. Once, she sent a package, a small box with cookies, a handwritten note, and a photo of them from when he was 10, arms wrapped around her waist at the beach. It was returned, unopened. She put it in the attic, beside the box of Thomas's old jackets. Jason was gone, too. She found his note tucked into the book he had once admired on the hallway shelf. Old poetry bound in leather. Brittle pages smelling of ink and mildew. "I don't want to be the man your son sees first after 10 years. Maybe in another life. Helena, one with less rain. No name, just that, folded carefully, left like a goodbye that never dared speak aloud." She didn't look for him. Charleston went on. Of course, the city doesn't pause for grief. The neighbors walked dogs. Mail arrived. Church bells rang Sunday mornings. But for Helena, the sound of the world came through a wall of fog. Muffled, unwelcome. The house aged quickly after everyone left. Plaster cracked above the fireplace. The stairs groaned louder. The basement started leaking again. She heard it at night. The slow, soft drip, like someone pacing underwater. She never went back down. Not once. She told herself it was because of the damp, the mold, the danger, but really, it was memory. The basement had become a shrine. To what? She wasn't sure. A moment, a version of herself she could no longer justify. A heartbeat that didn't last. Sometimes she would pass by the basement door and place her hand on the knob. Just for a second, just to remember how it felt to open something. But she never turned it. Nights were worst. The house grew cold in corners first. Then it reached the center. Then her bones. She slept little, sometimes not at all. She took to sitting in the kitchen past midnight, listening to the water. One evening, during a storm that didn't come with thunder, she lit a candle, walked barefoot across the hall, down the stairs. Each step creaked like a question she didn't want answered. At the bottom, she paused. The basement was just as she left it. The candles had melted down to nubs. The rug still stained with old water. The desk still scarred. And in the far corner, covered with a sheet, the tall antique mirror Thomas once found at an estate sale. Helena hadn't looked into that mirror since before the accident. Not even once. She pulled the sheet away. Dust bloomed into the air like a memory released. The reflection looked back. A woman, thin, pale, eyes dark, not with makeup but with years. She touched her face. It moved with her, but she did not recognize the woman. She stood there a long time. Then she whispered into the dark, "I didn't cheat for love." The mirror held her gaze. "I cheated for the silence." She reached out, touched the glass. Cold. But now, silence is all I have left. From somewhere behind the wall, a pipe creaked. Then, drip, 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 the house exhaled. And the storm, wherever it was, promised to return. But Helena's storm wasn't the last. In another city, under a different sky, another woman told the police she was just fixing her water heater. But the bedsheets told a different story. Next, Rachel from Phoenix. He was just fixing the heater until she pulled him into her bedroom. A missing husband, a silent crime scene, and a secret so dangerous, it left blood in the threads. Subscribe now, because some affairs don't end in heartbreak, they end in disappearance.